it's a real story. Real story of a haunting journey in which the ghosts called for help and we responded. People often talk about ghost tours like they're a thrill ride in an amusement park, something fun and exciting, but safely distanced from reality. I always thought the same until I accidentally crossed paths with the haunted tour in my hometown. A few weeks after some family drama drove me back to my roots, I spotted a flyer nailed to a telephone pole while I was going for a late-night walk. Hauntings of Old Milltown. Join our ghost tour if you dare. The flyer beckoned in blood-red lettering. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not really, but I could use a diversion from my ordinary life. Curious, and feeling a thrill of adventurous recklessness, I signed up. I wish I could say that I was prepared for what was to come, that somehow looking back, I saw warning signs, but I didn't. The night of the tour was cold and crisp. A shroud of fog lingered over everything like a sinister veil. As I stood outside the old town hall, my breath creating little clouds in the air, I felt a chill settle deep in my bones, and not just from the cold. The guide, an old man with silver hair and an unsettlingly wide grin, stood waiting for the group to gather. He introduced himself as Mr. Hargrove, and his voice vibrated with enthusiasm. "It's the history that haunts us," he declared, eyes glinting like polished stones. "The shadows of the past have a way of reaching out and tugging at our souls. Tonight, you will not be mere spectators. You will be part of the stories." I felt an overwhelming mix of excitement and dread, an odd cocktail that made my heart race. As we assembled into a loose cluster, he told us about the locations we would visit: the forsaken asylum at the edge of town, the dilapidated church with an infamous past, and the graveyard where restless spirits roamed. Each tale was steeped in blood and sorrow, stories of lives lost and spirits forever entangled in unresolved tragedies. As we stepped into the night, the streetlights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the cobblestones. I could feel a presence, a weight of countless souls, a tapestry of human misfortune wrapped around us like a heavy cloak. I didn't realize then just how deeply woven my fate would become with the darkness we were about to explore. Our first stop was the old St. Augustine Asylum, an imposing building that loomed large against the starless sky. Its jagged roof lines and broken windows looked like jagged teeth, ready to devour anyone who dared to venture near. Mr. Hargrove's eyes gleamed as he recounted the haunting tales intertwined with this place. "Once a sanctuary for the mentally ill," he began, a twinkle in his eye. The asylum was a place of hope that quickly devolved into chaos. Unacceptable treatments, cruel experiments, and tragic accidents led to the death of countless patients. By the time it closed its doors, it had gained a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the state. Each word dripped with reverence for the spirits that lingered there, and I felt myself growing captivated, caught in a web of historical intrigue. The air thickened as we crossed the threshold into the building. I followed closely, stepping over creaking floorboards and dust-covered tiles. That felt like stepping back in time. In the dimly lit hallways, faded wallpaper peeled away like the stories that had been long forgotten. I could almost hear the whispers of those who had suffered there, trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. The remnants of old beds lined the walls, rusted from neglect and decay, evoking images of patients confined and forgotten. As I snapped photos to document our journey, a creeping sensation slithered up my spine as if unseen eyes were watching me. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the hallway, strong enough to rattle the shattered windows. I felt a cluster of chills race through the group like a wave of fear. One of the participants squealed, clutching a friend's arm, and the atmosphere heightened. "Did you feel that?" she exclaimed, eyes wide. I turned my camera to capture the moment, desperate to immortalize the palpable tension brewing in the air. But when I glanced at the snapshot, my breath hitched painfully in my throat. In the background stood a figure dressed in an old-fashioned gown, face obscured in shadows but eyes glowing with a haunting familiarity. No one else had noticed it. I quickly glanced back to the group's faces, filled with surprise and intrigue, blissfully unaware of the specter watching us. "What is it?" a fellow tour member asked, peering over my shoulder. "Nothing," I stammered. "Just an odd lighting effect." Even as I spoke, I felt a coil of unease twist in my gut. We shuffled through the hallways, Mr. Hargrove quizzing us on the history of the asylum. He spoke animatedly, gesturing to creaking doors and dusty floors, intertwining facts with ghost stories, all while his eyes darted around the dim space, as if he were expecting a ghostly visitor to join us. The other participants in the tour ranged from curious locals to wide-eyed thrill-seekers. There was Sarah, a college student documenting her experiences for a series of online videos. Tom, a middle-aged skeptic and self-proclaimed ghostbuster with a ridiculous array of ghost hunting gadgets strapped to him, and an elderly couple who held hands and giggled nervously at the mention of the paranormal. Laughter and nervous jitters punctuated the air, and I felt an odd comfort in their companionship, even while the sense of dread continued to grow. As we explored deeper into the asylum, we entered the old therapy room, a ghastly place filled with remnants of a forgotten past. Pillows were strewn across the floor, and dust motes danced in the pale moonlight streaming through the dirty glass. "Anyone ever hear of the silent treatment?" Mr. Hargrove asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. This room was notorious. During the asylum's operations, patients were confined and denied speech therapy as a punishment for misbehavior. As a result, countless souls lost their voices forever. They say echoes of their anguished cries can still be heard at night. At his words, a freezing sensation swept through the room, and I couldn't tell if it was the draft from the window or something else entirely. I could almost hear muffled whispers swimming through the air, calling to something deep within me. I frowned and shook my head, dismissing it. After leaving the therapy room, we proceeded to the administrative offices, the floors scuffed and littered with broken furniture that had once held the weight of so many patients' troubled lives. The walls were covered with eerie paintings of tragic scenes, and in some of them I could have sworn I saw eyes looking back, filled with sorrow and regret. As we rounded a corner, an inexplicable chill ran up my spine, telling me we were nearing the epicenter of anguish within the asylum. I paused for a moment, taking in the ambience. The sounds of the group faded away. The air was thick with history, almost crackling with energy. "Here," Mr. Hargrove said, his voice suddenly serious, "is where they performed lobotomies." The patients who underwent this procedure were often referred to as the lost. The method. Mr. Hargrove paused, his brows furrowing as he peered at the symbols. "Those are said to be protective wards, meant to keep evil spirits at bay. But if they're disturbed, it might just do the opposite." A shiver coursed through me at his words. It felt as though the spirits of the asylum were watching, waiting, and I couldn't shake the sense that they were frustrated by our presence. "I can't help but feel drawn to them," I admitted, a strange sense of familiarity washing over me. "It's like they're calling out." "Be cautious," Mr. Hargrove replied. "The line between curiosity and danger is perilously thin in places like this." With my heart pounding, I stepped back from the symbols, trying to shake off the lingering sensation as the tour pressed on. We found ourselves in a room filled with dust-covered chairs and broken furniture, remnants of therapy sessions from decades ago. It felt almost frozen in time, as though the echoes of agonized cries lingered in the air, waiting for someone to acknowledge them. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I struggled to pay attention to Mr. Hargrove's lecture. "This room was notorious for hauntings," he said, raising his voice slightly to hold our rapt attention. Staff and patients alike reported seeing shadowy figures lurking just beyond their line of sight, appearing and vanishing like smoke. As he spoke, I scanned the room, my heart in my throat. A flash of movement caught my eye, just at the edge of the doorframe, a shadowy figure slipping away before I could clearly see it. I turned to Sarah, but she was occupied with her camera, oblivious to my panic. I closed my eyes. For a moment, breathing in the musty air, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. "Is everyone feeling okay?" Mr. Hargrove asked suddenly, causing everyone to chuckle. Nervously, "Let's see if we can stir up some of those spirits. Sometimes all it takes is a little inviting energy." At that moment, he suggested we each say our names aloud, followed by a request for a spirit to reveal itself. As one by one we introduced ourselves, the air seemed to thrum with energy. "Let's do this together then," he encouraged, closing his eyes and raising his hands. "Everyone, on 3. 1, 2, 3. We chanted our names, a chorus of nervous laughter mingling with anxious anticipation. The silence that followed was palpable, stretching painfully as we all glanced around, half expecting something to respond. The chuckles faded, swallowed up by the eerie atmosphere. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I noticed something alarming. Tom, the self-proclaimed skeptic, was absent. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Where had he gone? "Where's Tom?" I asked, glancing around frantically. The group began murmuring, eyes darting towards one another in confusion. Mr. Hargrove's mouth tightened into a thin line. "He shouldn't have wandered off," he muttered, anxiety creeping into his voice. The tour group nodded, a sense of panic washing over us as we spread out in search of him. My heart raced as an unsettling feeling settled deep in my gut. If something had happened to him, we would be the ones responsible. As I moved down the corridor, I called out, "Tom, are you here?" My voice echoed eerily, swallowed by the silence. Going deeper into the dark recesses of the asylum, I felt increasingly isolated from the group, the murmur of voices trailing behind me like ghosts. I reached the end of a hallway and found a dimly lit staircase leading down into shadow. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, but my curiosity overrode my fear. As I crept down the staircase, the temperature dropped sharply, a biting cold wrapping around me like a vice. My footsteps echoed ominously against the stone walls. I had to find Tom. "Tom," I called again, my voice barely above a whisper. The darkness seemed to press in on me, and I paused at the bottom of the stairs, catching my breath. There in the silence I heard something, a faint whisper that seemed to drift up from the depths below. "Come join us." I froze, heart pounding as the chilling words slithered through the air. They beckoned me, captivating and terrifying all at once. I turned back to the staircase, now feeling torn between escaping and discovering what awaited me. "Tom," I yelled again, desperation clawing at my throat. "Where are you?" I took a step forward into the dim room, squinting to see, when suddenly the floor creaked behind me. I spun around, half expecting to see someone just behind me, but I was met with nothing but shadows. The whispers continued, echoing in my ears, urging me to step closer to the abyss below. I felt a presence, thick and suffocating, shifting in the air around me. I walked further into the room, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't understand. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement, just a flicker of something in an adjoining darkened hall. "Tom," I ventured cautiously, feeling the walls close in. Something shifted in the shadows, a figure darting away, just out of my sight. I swallowed hard, the urgency driving me forward. "Please, where are you?" I begged, my voice trembling as I followed the fleeting movement. As I moved cautiously into the shadows, I felt a gust of wind slither past me, carrying whispers that seemed to resonate in my bones. Voices, barely audible, urged me to stop, warning me against venturing deeper. "Turn back, you're not safe," I heard, the words echoing faintly as if they were part of the walls themselves. My heart raced, but I pressed on, the flickering light in my phone barely cutting through the darkness. "Tom, is that you?" I called out again, trying to remain calm, desperately hoping he was just playing a prank. The atmosphere felt charged, a current of fear and anticipation coursing through the hallways. Just as I caught sight of a shadow darting around the corner, a heavy thud caught my attention. Instinct kicked in, and I sprinted toward the noise. My feet pounded against the floor, every creak echoing my racing heartbeat as I stumbled into a room filled with rusted chairs and overturned tables. Then I froze, caught in a moment of horror. There, eyes wide with terror, stood Tom, pale as a ghost. His hair was disheveled, and his breath came in quick, panicked gasps. Did you hear it?" he stammered, shaking visibly. "I heard someone calling my name. I followed the voice and—" He glanced over his shoulder, fear evident in his eyes. "What did you see?" I whispered, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. Something was in here. It was like a shadow, but it had a face that was smiling. The quiver in his voice revealed how deeply his encounter affected him. The urgency of the moment cleared some haze in my mind. "We have to get back to the group," I urged, glancing at the dark corners, where eyes might be watching. "They need to know we're okay." Just as we turned to leave, the whispers crescendoed, rising like an ominous chant that enveloped us. My heart raced. Every instinct screamed that we needed to escape. We hurried back up the stairs, with the whispers dissolving into an eerie echo behind us. As we neared the main floor, the lights flickered erratically, and I felt the heaviness that had been wrapping around my heart tighten. I struggled to regain my composure, but the flood of emotions engulfed me like a tempest. Memories, not my own, crashed into my consciousness, overwhelming me. Images of a girl, trapped and terrified, Lila, tumbling through the shadows, begged me to break through the chains that bound her spirit. "Are you okay?" Sarah's voice broke through the haze as she rushed to my side, concern mingling with fear. I don't know. I think I saw something about a girl," I stammered, looking around to find the group clustered closer, faces drawn with concern. "Her name is Lila. She's trapped here." "Lila." Mr. Hargrove's eyes widened with recognition. "The girl from the stories. That means there's more to the tale than we realized." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing as I searched his face for clarity. "Lila was one of the last patients at the asylum," he explained urgently. "Her family abandoned her here, and she never truly accepted her fate. The stories you hear about her, hauntings, people feel her presence, and there have been countless claims of her voice, echoing within these walls." "Can we help her?" I asked, the weight of a terrifying resolve forming in my chest. "If we can reach her spirit," Mr. Hargrove mused, "we might be able to bring peace to her restless soul, but it means confronting the darkness that binds her here." I felt a heavy knot settle in my stomach. "What if we can't?" Mr. Hargrove's eyes were somber. "Then the shadows may claim another life." The somber weight of Mr. Hargrove's words hung over us as we stumbled deeper into the asylum. Each step felt like a descent into madness, flooded with the realization that we might be stepping over a line where echoes of the past loom larger than the living. "Everyone," Mr. Hargrove announced, "we're going to attempt to summon Lila's spirit. If she hears us, maybe she'll respond." "Isn't that dangerous?" someone whispered, trepidation evident across the group's faces. His gaze hardened. "There are risks involved in awakening spirits. I can only guide you based on what I've learned, and it's up to each of you to be prepared." The reality of our situation closed in around me. I could sense fear pooling in everyone's gut, yet there was also an unsettling thrill, a mix of dread and anticipation, building as we settled into a small circle, hands joined together, the cold air bustling around us. "Close your eyes," Mr. Hargrove instructed, his voice steady yet echoing uncertainty. We obeyed, enveloped in darkness, our heartbeats synchronizing into a frantic rhythm. "Picture Lila," he urged, "and call out to her. Let her know she's not forgotten, that she deserves to be free." The words swirled through my mind like a haunting echo, rekindling my earlier encounter with echoes in room. But as I summoned her name to the forefront of my thoughts, the whispers returned louder, more insistent, a cacophony of yearning voices merged into a haunting symphony. "Lila, we're here." I breathed, feeling the cold grip of the night tighten around me. "We want to help you." But then, darkness swept over me like an imposing tide, and panic gripped my heart. The shadows flickered to life, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. A deep growl reverberated through the chamber, drowning my call. Frigid air circled my neck, and an overwhelming sense of despair crept into my core. Something ancient and vengeful lurked just beyond the veil, an old wound screaming to be acknowledged. Our session of spirit summoning ended abruptly when one of the group members, overwhelmed by fear, broke the circle, gasping for breath. The spell was shattered, and a swell of confusion and fear wrapped tightly around us. "We need to leave this room," Tom shouted, panic coloring his voice, and a wave of pressure dangerously tightened across my chest. We fled the room. Rushes of energy still lingered. Something had awakened, both in our hearts and in the shadows. Mr. Hargrove regained composure once we reached the safety of a more open space, but I could see the tension lacing his brows. "We need to head to the old church," he said, gesturing forward with renewed urgency. "It's one of Lila's last known locations. If we truly want to reach her, we may need to enter." As we stepped outside, the world seemed eerily different, quiet but alive with hidden intentions. The church loomed nearby, a crumbling edifice bleeding history. As we approached, the ominous clouds overhead thickened, matching the trepidation building in my gut. "It looks even worse up close," Sarah murmured, her voice trembling. "I heard the church has its own stories," I replied, recalling some legends I had brushed off earlier. "People talk about how worshippers would go missing after attending services. Some say they could hear voices, prayers long lost to the ages." Mr. Hargrove nodded, acknowledging the weight of our task ahead. "Let's move swiftly," said, "and stay together. The air inside may not be welcoming." As we stood at the entrance, the heavy wooden doors groaned in protest as we pushed them open, and they creaked slowly towards darkened interiors. A sliver of moonlight filtered through shattered windows, revealing a sanctuary lost in despair. The air thrummed with the aftermath of unfulfilled prayers, heavy with promise and threat. But I would have to set aside my qualms for the moment. Lila was calling, and apart from my instinct for self-preservation, something deeper within urged me forward. As we stepped inside, the weight of the sanctuary enveloped us in a mournful embrace. Rotted pews lined the center aisle, and shadows danced between the rows, whispering secrets of lost souls. Mr. Hargrove stepped forward, commanding the group's attention. "This church," he began, somberly, "was a place of refuge for many, but also the scene of unimaginable tragedy. Those who came to find solace often left with nothing but tales of horror, their voices dulled into whispers." As he spoke, I stared at the altar, dust swirling like memories waiting to awaken. My thoughts drifted back to Tom and the haunting shadow he'd encountered earlier. "What did you see?" "Exactly," I prompted him, the memory nagging at me. Tom looked down, reluctant to share, but the fear etched into his features said it all. I felt a figure, more like a presence," he began slowly. "At first, it felt like someone reaching for me, and when I turned, there was this face staring back, twisted and smiling. It felt wrong, like it was just pretending to be alive." "But shadows can't smile, Tom," I pointed out. "It could have been your mind playing tricks. This place that feeds on fear." "Maybe," he replied, his voice wavering, "but it felt too real. I heard it. It said my name." The group exchanged uneasy glances. "Do you think it was Lila?" Sarah asked, her voice practically a whisper. "Not all spirits are friendly," Mr. Hargrove added, notable gravity coloring his tone. "Some may seek revenge, while others may simply wish to be remembered." The air thickened as we all considered this chilling possibility. A knot of dread formed in my stomach. I couldn't help but think I had opened a door, unwittingly bridging our world with the darker corners of the afterlife. As we delved deeper into the somber church, an unsettling sense of familiarity washed over me. I felt as though I were being drawn into a web woven by lost souls, and I was both fearful and entranced by the thought of Lila needing our help. I felt the atmosphere grow thicker, and as the air crackled with energy, I opened the door. Beyond lay another room larger, filled with tables and darkened corners. I forced my way through, drawing in a shaky breath, believing that the truth would reside somewhere within. "This place is a prison," I murmured aloud, the weight of the past pouring into me like a heavy cloak. Tom, still breathless with fear, fumbled to keep close behind. "You sure this is smart?" he panted, glancing over his shoulder. But I had no time to consider the consequences. The shadows were tightening around us, the luring whispers beckoning us to seek the truth hidden in this desolate room. In that instant I understood the enormity of our task, to unveil the darkness lurking behind the stories of suffering. As we regrouped in the room, everything suddenly quieted. The air felt charged, electrified with anticipation. I took a deep breath, willing myself to push through the encroaching darkness. "Lila," I called out, unsure if she could hear me. "We want to know the truth. Please guide us." A breeze stirred the stale air, and I felt her presence enveloping us. "It lies within the walls," she whispered, soft and haunting. "Those who are lost wait endlessly. Listen to their stories, and set them free." Moving cautiously, I stepped deeper into the room. I noticed a large archive of boxes lining one wall, their weathered surfaces appearing benign, yet concealing the legacy of forgotten truths. Inside lay forgotten records of all who had once roamed the halls, their names and their stories etched into history, yet hidden from time. Together, we began sifting through the boxes, our hearts racing as pieces began to surface. Pages turned, incomplete sentences and fragmented accounts revealed lives lost and families torn apart. The weight of sorrow was palpable, and I could feel the spirits swirling around us, eager for the truth to unfurl. As we delved deeper, one document caught my eye, a yellowed letter from a mother pleading for her child's release from the asylum, her words painted with anguish and despair. Tears welled in my eyes as I recognized the desperation of parents who had long since vanished there, pleas falling on deaf ears. "This is it," I said, holding up the document. "This is how we help them." But as the truth about the asylum began to host within our hearts, the shadows seemed to pulse with anger. The manifestations of sorrow surged with intensity, and I felt the temperature drop drastically. A dreadful tension enveloped the room as Lila's spirit reacted to the unveiling of her story. "We cannot let the truth suffocate," she cried, the atmosphere swirling violently around us. The candles flickered wildly, casting distorted shadows against the stone walls. Whispers erupted into screams, a cacophony of despair that sought to overpower us. Shockwaves rippled through the air, and the walls seemed to shift. Despair clawed at my very being, filling my mind with images of the abandoned patients, their anguish transforming into rage. Somehow, they knew we were delving into their forgotten stories, dredging up the painful past that had confined them for so long. "Get out," a voice called, a guttural growl echoing from the dark corners. "Leave us in peace." The shadows erupted around us, swirling like a vortex filled with chaos, threatening to engulf everything in their path. I stumbled backward as I felt Lila's presence flicker. She was being overwhelmed by the collective rage that had accumulated over the years. "Fight it," I shouted, desperate to reach out to her. "We can't let the darkness drown us." With a sudden burst of determination, I gathered the strength to stand taller, bolstered by the knowledge we had gleaned. "We need to set them free. We can't abandon them." "Where? How?" Sarah cried, fear echoing in her voice as we fought against the growing darkness that threatened to claim us. "If we can reach the graveyard, we might be able to perform a cleansing ritual memorialize their suffering," I urged, grabbing Tom and Sarah by the arms. "They need to know they will not be forgotten." "Lead the way," Tom said, and together we rushed toward the exit. As we fled the church, I felt Lila beside us, her ethereal presence urging us on, guiding us toward the next step. Reaching outside, the air was heavy with tension, but I felt an urgency buried deep within me, a need to reach the graveyard and fulfill the promises we had made. Even as an unsettling aura enveloped us, I found strength in our collective resolve. We reached the graveyard, the moon illuminating the ancient tombstones that reached out to the sky like gnarled fingers. A profound stillness hung over the area, as if the spirits of the dearly departed were holding their breath to witness what was to come. Here, I pointed to an empty plot filled with tangled roots and overgrown grass. This is where we perform the ritual. It needs to be done where their stories can be set free. We gathered together, kneeling in a circle, hearts pounding with trepidation and anticipation as the night deepened. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with fear. "We each read the names we discovered, the souls who were forgotten," I announced, knowing that speaking their names would resonate deeply in the atmosphere, bring their spirits forth, and allow space for closure. As we began to call out the names we'd found in the records, I could feel the energy shift. It grew heavier, the atmosphere crackling as shadows danced around us like wraiths, intertwining their sorrows with our own. Slowly, the shadows began to glow, calls of anguish transformed into whispers of gratitude. "Remember us," they cried, voices melding with the wind. "Set us free." And as I looked to my companions, my heart swelled. "We remember you. You are not forgotten." With each name spoken, a light began to seep into the darkness, filling it with warmth. "We love you. We honor you." Suddenly, the shadowy figures coalesced around us, swirling like a blinding storm of memories. Unable to contain their resolve as they reached for you, I felt Lila's presence calming, her visage appearing clear amongst the shadows. "You did this. You've remembered us," she cried, her voice suddenly brightening as the storm dimmed slightly. "Now I can free them." At that moment, something extraordinary, yet terrifying, occurred. The spirits began to materialize, their forms illuminating as they gathered around us. A countless number of souls, seeking solace, eager to break free of the chains that bound them. A rush of energy burst through me, empowering every step as their voices intertwined, harmonizing against the night. Shadows of despair dissolved as a warm light enveloped us, illuminating the once dark graveyard. "Thank you," Lila whispered, ethereal yet powerful. "I will carry your names with me." A wind swept through the area, lifting the mists of despair that had clung to the earth. The warmth of their gratitude illuminated the darkness, where sorrow had lingered for far too long. But just as the spirits began to dissipate, a dark presence surged, trying to claim the energy. Released as feeble sprites were carrying on with their freedom, it grew desperate and violent, echoing with an unsettling roar. "No, you have awakened them," an unseen voice bellowed, sending shivers down my spine. "They belong to me." "Fight," Mr. Hargrove shouted, his voice carrying authority amidst the chaos. "They will not take you. Lila, you are free. We remember you. We will not forget," I voiced, stealing strength from that flicker of hope. Tom, shaking, determined to join the chorus, stepped closer, reciting a name through gritted teeth. "William, your struggle is not in vain." One by one, each of us began to weave the names of those lost into this powerful narrative, channeling the spirit's resolve to fight against the encroaching void. The collective fear diminished, and the stories began to take root in the ground beneath us. "Remember their pain, but let them go," I cried, shouting with reckless abandon as we lifted our voices louder, proclaiming their existence, their stories anew. With one final push against the darkness, a fierce wind roared through the graveyard, carrying the woes away into the night, into a horizon of peace. The remnants of pain scattered like ashes, dispersed in the breeze, a cathartic release as spirits began to dissolve into the radiant light. Exhaustion washed over me, and when the chaos fell silent, I collapsed to my knees, the weight of the world pressing down on me. The shadows retreated, leaving only whispers of the past, lingering in the air. Is it over?" Sarah panted, kneeling beside me, her brows knitted together in disbelief. "Yes," Mr. Hargrove murmured, his voice shaky yet filled with awe. "We have done what they could not." It was a reckoning for their stories. But the toll of the night felt heavy on all our shoulders. The heartache was palpable, a blend of sorrow and relief filling the air, the recognition that we had merely scratched the surface of understanding the burden we had witnessed laid bare before us. We lingered for a moment longer in the graveyard, the gathered spirits heavy in the air like the last echoes of a forgotten melody. Lila's presence felt faint, as though she was slipping away into the twilight, but I could feel warmth and gratitude wrapping around me. "Thank you," a whisper threaded through the air. My heart swelled at the sound. "We'll remember," I promised, tears pooling in my eyes at the realization of what we had been, a part of, a journey shaped by empathy, connection, and an undeniable bond to those who found solace within us. As we slowly made our way back toward the asylum, the weight of the shadows had lessened, replaced by the remnants of those who had found meaning in our actions. It was an unbreakable bond to the past. But even as the dawn approached, I couldn't shake the sensation that our journey was far from complete. Whispers threatened to return. They seemed to coil tighter around me like the arms of the very shadows we just fought. Though we left the graveyard behind, I felt a lingering sensation upon my skin, a coldness that whispered through the air and warmed in presence, as though remnants of the stories we had awakened still followed. Lila's presence flickered in the corner of my vision, a poignant reminder of the connection forged between us, suffering shared and stories renewed. But uncertainty clouded my heart. I wondered how much of their darkness lingered. As we reached the asylum one last time, I felt an urge to look back, to ensure the moment would not fall into shadows again. Tom, Sarah, and Mr. Hargrove joined me, mirroring the unspoken recognition that something had fundamentally shifted. Yet as we turned to leave, I found myself compelled to carry Lila's story with me. From the moment I first stepped into this haunted tour, the ghosts had woven their narrative through my very substance, igniting a fire of determination deep within my heart. The noise of our footsteps echoed through the entrance every time a whisper followed, each soft rustle pressed against the edges of our memories, the chilling imprint of each encounter burning into our minds. The air remained thick, lingering with the past, both ancient and fresh. I turned back to face the asylum, running my fingers along its cracked stone walls, feeling the pervasive weight rest heavily on my fingertips. Something about Lila's story resonated within me. It had become part of who I was. Never again could I separate myself from the connection to the lost. Tom placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me as we stood united, in heart and in purpose, yet still tangled with the lingering shadows that enveloped our minds. "Will we ever escape?" he whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "I hope so," I replied, voice filled with uncertainty. "But her energy will follow us. It's something we can share, a warning of our past." As we settled back into our daily lives, I enveloped myself in the stories of those we had encountered. The lingering shadows felt more like companions than eerie remnants, each word a thread tying me to the very fabric of existence. But even as the weeks passed, thoughts of Lila returned to haunt my dreams. Night after night, I awoke to the echoes of her voice, urging me to carry her truth forward, to share what we had experienced. In the stillness of the night, I began to document everything, the stories of Lila, the history of the asylum, and the souls we had set free. With each word I wrote, I felt fragments of the past, clicking back into place, stitching together a story long buried beneath layers of suffering. Yet even as I was determined to write their history, a fear crept in. The thrill of uncertainty that once drove me began to replace itself with dread. The struggles of embracing the past weighed heavily on me, but I often felt Lila's energy reach out in dreams. She would watch as I wrote. Sometimes her presence offered comfort, other times it reminded me that her story remained unresolved among so many others. During the day, I toured different locations, sharing snippets of Lila's tale with interest groups. I was met with wary curiosity, reluctance, and sometimes disbelief. I wanted them to know, just as I had learned, there was a history permeating the air that we often overlooked. And each time I stepped back into those rooms, the shadows would flicker with anticipation. I could hear the echoes whispering from the past in agonized chants of longing, a cacophony, eager to share their burdens. Ultimately, I realized that to embrace the dark, I had to accept that it existed within me too. It would always be a part of my journey, a comfort amidst the chaos, a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience to share their stories. So I kept writing, penning every name mentioned by the spirits we had met, knowing they were forever etched in the fabric of my own soul. I share Lila's story, giving a voice to the silent and ensuring that their struggles were chronicled within my own. While I may never be free of the darkness, I found solace in the knowledge that I could illuminate the way for others. With Lila watching over me, I steeled myself, believing in the power to transcend our fears through connection, reminding all who dared to listen that the past would never truly fade, but live on within the echoes of our stories.